St. Patrick's Day mead?
That's right. Everybody makes green beer, so we're making green mead.
Now this is another one of my brilliant brainchilds. And when I say that, I come up with this crazy idea, and then I bug Brian and our other admins to try to figure out how to create this monstrosity.
Yeah, she comes to me with a list and says, can you make a mead with these things and make it green?
Yeah. So
Sure.
And the reason why I do this is because I have these great concepts, at least I think they're great, but I don't really know how to do the approximations of volumes and use the math for the fermentation. I do know which things ferment, which things don't ferment, so I at least get that figured out. But then sometimes there's differences between adding things in primary and adding things in secondary. So for this particular thing, I wanted it to be reminiscent of an Irish whiskey. I know that sounds weird. It's not going to be at all like an Irish whiskey, but I wanted it to be reminiscent of an Irish whiskey. So Irish whiskey, to me, has flavor notes that are floral and really smooth and soft. And I knew I definitely wanted to oak this in the end because I wanted to get those vanilla notes and that super smoothness for the finish. So,
But she also wanted it to be green.
and I also wanted it to be green because, you know.
That was actually the more difficult part, but it was solved rather quickly. Now, just going to say this right now. We have not made this yet. This recipe is virginal. It's not been used, so we're going to try it out. Anyway, to make this mead, you're going to need 3 pounds of wildflower honey. That's what we're using for this one today.
Now, a note about the honey. If we did not have literally pounds and
60
pounds
pounds.
and pounds of honey already in our possession, I would have insisted on buying clover honey for this. Because
I talked her out of it because
clover honey.
we're not buying more honey. We have 100 pounds of honey. I'm not buying more honey right now. There's just no need.
So besides the fact that clover honey seemed like it went with the theme, clover honey is a really neutral honey, and so that is going to let the other flavors shine forward. But
I agree. She's absolutely right. Given the option, I would use clover.
we also knew that because we
practicality.
wanted it to be a floral flavor profile, that using a wildflower honey would be perfectly fine as well.
Anyway, to make this mead, 3 pounds wildflower honey, 2 grams of Fermaid O as a yeast nutrient. Do you really need yeast nutrients in this one? Probably not, because wait till you see how everything that's going in it. We're going to be putting in 2 pinches of an orange or citrus zest. This one actually happens to be our rank per lime zest, which is very orange when you smell it. The citron really comes through as orange to me. 1 ounce of elderflowers dried. Now this is just the flowers of the elder tree, right? Yeah, elder tree. Not berries, just flowers. It's a mildly licorice-like smell.
Yeah.
Mildly.
I'm hoping that the roses overpower
We didn't get to rose yet.
that, but okay.
1 ounce, that's 28 grams by weight, by the way. And then, where's the other one? Oh yeah, the rose. This is also 1 ounce or 28 grams. This is an example of why I like to go by weight, not volume, because these two weigh exactly the same, but vastly different volumes. Now, the way I calculated that was, I looked at recipes that used both of these things, not together, but they used those things. And I said, well, if we're gonna use both, and that's the main flavoring components, we do want to use about half of each. So I used, the 1 ounce each. A lot of recipes called for 2 ounces or even more. So we went a little bit on the safe side there. And then for the green coloration, I decided on 2 things. One of them was spirulina, which is a blue-green algae, and it's actually a great protein source, and it's one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. I don't know if that translates over well to yeast nutrition. I didn't actually look that up, but I'm gonna say that if it's good for us, it's probably good for them too, okay? They use a lot of the same vitamins and minerals that we do, so probably not a horrible thing. Then I thought, well, see, that's like a dark blue-green color, which is nice, but if we want it to not be so blue, we want it to green a little bit more, I'm gonna use a little bit of matcha tea. Now, it's just green tea, whole green tea. How much are we using? 1 teaspoon of this and a half teaspoon of the spirulina. The light green of this mixed with the spirulina should give us a nice brightish green color.
At least that's the hope.
That's the theory. How much of the green color will stay is the one thing we don't actually know. But we can always add more later if we really wanted to. And even a slightly green mead is still green mead. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, so we have our 3 pounds of honey already in here. To this, I think I'm gonna add water first because I wanna get some of that honey mixed up before I start adding other things and getting them all stuck to the spoon and that sort of thing. So I'm just gonna add water. Now this is our filtered water. If you don't have water that tastes good, like if it tastes like a swimming pool, you probably don't wanna use it. Filtered water from the store works beautifully. We actually have a reverse osmosis system and we have a whole house sediment and chlorine filter. So this just has the sediment and chlorine removed.
Yeah, this isn't RO water.
Yeah. RO water, if you have the remineralizer, is totally fine. We don't have the remineralizer, so I don't use our RO water for that. Okay, I'm just gonna go about halfway for the moment, and I'm going to start mixing this up. For the mixing, I'm just gonna use my spoon of unusual size and just get in there and mix it around. We did use warm water, okay? It's like probably 110 Fahrenheit or so, so it's not hot water. You don't wanna kill anything. You don't wanna boil your honey or anything like that. But it does help it to break up a little bit when you're trying to mix. Don't be afraid to splash at this point, except don't get it like, you know, in your partner's eyes or anything. But aeration at this point is a good thing. We've had a few people recently asking about sulfurous smells and things in their brews, and the reason is they didn't put enough oxygen in the very beginning of fermentation, so it'll age out, it just takes longer. It's harder to do once the fermenters start getting bigger. We've had a lot of people ask about 5-gallon fermenters and things like that. How do you shake the bejesus out? Well, for those,
carefully.
Yeah, use a drill with the whip attachment. I mean, that's the best option. It really is. I just don't do it on the 1 gallons because why? You know, just pick it up and shake it. It's not that big of a deal. This, it's a little bit more tricky. I could probably pick this one up and shake it, but then I'd have to put the lid on it, and if the lid leaked at all, then it's all over the place. And so you just stir it. Not a big deal. Okay, it's time to start adding some of those other ingredients. Everything's just gonna stick to the spoon. I'm just gonna have to deal with it.
Now, if you notice, all the other stuff we're gonna add is basically a small particle-like thing. So if we wanted to, we could use a brew bag and pour all those in there. But because they're so small particle-like things, the brew bag really isn't gonna hold all of it anyway. Also, we've noticed that sometimes when you put a bunch of stuff like this, particularly these finer particle things in a brew bag, it traps the gas as the fermentation process is happening and pushes that brew bag up against the airlock area, causing a big mess. So we've opted to freeform it today, and we're foregoing the brew bag.
A lot of people ask about that all the time. That's why we just wanted to talk about it a little bit. I also all a brew bag does is it contains it and may stop a little bit of mess when you're racking, but we use an auto siphon, so it's not that big of a deal. I've never really had it be a huge problem, so we just don't worry about it. But if you want to use a brew bag, by all means, use a brew bag.
So we only need to add the fermented oat and our yeast and some more water, obviously. And I've already started stirring it up because I was impatient and I wanted to see what it looks like. I think it was Adam, maybe it was Paul, I don't remember at this time, but they were concerned that my color combinations was going to make it turn kind of like swamp water. Yeah, it's kind of swamp water.
We'll call it Gator Mead.
But because we're using those primarily as a colorant and not as a flavorant, we can adjust our color, or at least attempt to, in secondary.
I'm gonna add some more water. Now, we're using a little big mouth fermenter today. That's a 1.4 gallon because there's gonna be a lot of heavy sediment. I mean, this stuff is just gonna soak up the liquid, and that way we end up with a 1 gallon product in the end. Go to about there. I'd say this is looking green. I think we got the color combo just right, even with the rose petals in there, which are gonna extract a little bit of color, so this might go a little bit on the brownish side. I'm hoping it doesn't do that, but we can always add more matcha. Gives a nice bright green color. It was at this point that I started to regret my not using of a bag. We talked about it off camera, and I just don't prefer to use them. It's just me. Now, this stuff will soak up the liquid, and some of it will fall out of suspension, some of it won't. And you know what? It's okay. I'm just not going to get upset about it. For yeast, I'm using Lalvin 71 Beast, also known as Lalvin 71B/1122. This doesn't say it. It actually just says 71B. I'm using a whole packet because I use a whole packet almost all the time now. I'm using 71B because it just works in our environment really, really well. It's supposed to be a low nutrient density necessary yeast, but there's a lot of nutrient in here. All those flowers and everything give a lot of nutrient for the yeast. So this one's over-nutriented. Is that a bad thing? No, because these aren't really commercial nutrients being added, and the Fermaid O is organic. Not really gonna be a problem. So I'm not worried about too much nutrients. It just means it'll kick off faster and it'll ferment cleaner, meaning the end product should be as pure of a taste as possible, which is what we want for this. We want a nice, refreshing mead, not something that's gonna taste a little stodgy and need a year to age out. Because, you know, we wanna show you this sooner rather than later.
I'm actually pretty happy with that color green now that it's mixed through. But we don't know what fermentation is going to do to
Yeah,
it. So.
it's probably going to change. I would imagine it'll come out a little clearer, but it might have like a greenish tint, which is really all we're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, that is mixed up pretty good. Get as much off the spoon as I can. It's just, yeah. And now it's time to take a reading. I'm taking a reading so that we can know where this starts, and I'm estimating this should probably be around like a 1.100. I did go a little bit over a gallon here, so it might even be a touch lower than that. And the trick here is to try to get not flowers in here. It does already have a really nice green color, kind of olive drab. It'll extract more as time goes on too. Okay, we have a 1.088 original gravity, and that's pretty okay. We might end up step feeding or something with this later on. Who knows? You never know. You never know what we're gonna do. I don't actually have a label yet, so I'm just gonna make a note right here. But this sample gets poured right back in here. Why? Because everything was sanitized in.
The red bucket of sanitization!
By that we mean there's a red bucket right there that's filled with star sand and water mixed according to the manufacturer's recommended directions that we're dunking stuff in and cleaning everything up. All this stuff was sanitized in there so that way everything's nice and clean. There's one step left to go. That is the lid and airlock. And these guys have 1 million threads. It's like 1.5 miles of threads. And once you get it, see, it just goes right on. And when you get to the bottom, you want to make sure that you crank it down really good. I love this fermenter, but the seal isn't really the best. And this is a little wet.
There is a squishy foam padding on the underside, and what you want to do by cranking it down really tight is compressing that foam, and that's going to create your seal.
Like that. Stick in the airlock. And I love the setup for airlocks on these because you don't ever have to worry about it popping out or anything. It actually friction fits really, really nicely in there.
It comes with the bung that fits that perfectly.
Right, exactly. So you don't even have to worry about getting the right one. And now, what are we gonna do with this?
We're gonna let it sit.
Hopefully just a couple hours and it'll start up. If not, it'll be a couple of days, but we'll be back to show you what it looks like.
All right, so as you can see, we have some activity. Bubbler's bubbling away. We have our massive amount of herbs.
You can see that it's foamy in there though, like you can see bubbles coming through. So there's definitely something happening.
And you can see a little bit of swirl of the sediment that is already in suspension.
Yeah, there's a little lava lamp action happening. Not too much yet. It's, you know, it's started up. I mean, it's only been a couple hours, so it's kind of impressive that it's going at all. It does still feel just a little bit warm, meaning like, you know, not even body temperature warm. It's probably like 80 degrees. That's enough to kick things off though. We do keep our house around 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit most of the time, so that's the temperature that most of our brews stay at.
So with that said, we know that this has been cooling since we put it together. And sometimes a cooling fermentation, even when it started, will show reverse pressure because of the air differential. Since we don't have that at all, we have nice bubblage going on. I'm going to say that this is a happy fermentation so far.
And I'm doing the swirl to get that cap back under liquid again. We want to make sure that it stays. And see, you got to be careful because it does leak, okay? There's never a perfect seal here, so I just want to keep it wet, and I'll do that every day or every couple of days to make sure that it stays nice and moist.
Yeah, when you put this away to ferment, you want to keep an eye on it to make sure that it is staying moist and agitated ever so often to keep that under the water so that way you're not going to have any issues. Also, as this is a new time brew for us and probably a new time brew for you, it's a good idea to put it on a baking sheet with edges when it's first going because you never know if it might really take off and go explosion on you out through the airlock. That is not a problem, it's just a mess. So putting it on a tray with edges will catch the mess for you and therefore it won't be a problem.
But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.